What floor?
It's on the first floor, sweetie. Hi, Sharni.
Hi, are you ready? Hello? Oh, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello, hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Hi, Rajiv.
Hi, Rajiv. Can you hear me?
Hi, Rajiv.
Hi, Nandu. How are you?
I'm good, yeah. Long time.
Yeah, I just saw the message. Good to see you. Just 1 minute. Are we the only two people right now on the call?
Shalini is on, I think.
Shalini is on. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, of course, Shalini.
Okay, let's get started. Nandu, whenever you're ready.
Oh, it's just three of us?
It's 6:15, so people will join when they join.
Okay, cool.
There's still 1 more minute to go for the right time.
Okay, so
We'll wait 1 more minute. We'll wait 1 more minute.
Sure.
Sorry, Shalini, I had to kind of make it so early.
Oh, no, not a problem at all.
Kind of.
So, Shalini, which part of the world are you located right now?
I'm in the San Francisco area.
Okay, so what's the time now?
It's 6:14.
6:14. Okay. Nandu, you are in Bangalore, I presume.
No, actually, I'm in San Francisco.
Okay.
Back here, yeah, it's kind of. I've been shuttling around a little bit this time.
Okay.
My son decided to take the weekend. He works in New York, so he decided to take the weekend off and come hang with me.
Okay.
This weekend, so we have we're gonna goof off in the city today and go for a long hike tomorrow. So I haven't spent much time with him since last
Okay.
year was busy. His final year, and then he kind of got a job, and
Okay, good to know. Just telling before people come, it's 7:46. Before we begin, I have to leave at 8:30 India time in 45 minutes. So some other call, but Shalini, can we begin, Nandu?
Yep, let's get started. Okay. So very cool.
Wonderful. Yeah.
So I have 3 slides. So much more of a visual guy. So I don't know if Shalini, you or Rajiv have seen this this particular image. You know who Mini-Me is, right?
No, we haven't.
Oh, you need to watch the Spy Who Shagged Me. The what was it? Anyway, Austin Powers. So it's from that. But anyway, see, part of understanding someone's journey is to kind of understand where they started. You know, what baggage they started with, and I know that most of you kind of know me, but don't really have much of a. I mean, we didn't get to more deeply understand each other when we were in IIM. So
yes,
a lot of my journey and what I did and how I did it and the decisions I made were all kind of driven, I think, at least in the initial part, by kind of what formed me before I came to IIM, and that was primarily my family. So one major influence in my life was, of course, my dad. Incredibly smart man. He ran away from home when he was 10, kind of educated himself, and became the principal of the Trivandrum Maharaja Sanskrit College before he was 40. And that was a pretty big deal at that time. And then from that point on, I mean, so very, very smart, very charismatic, could keep audiences spellbound for hours on end. And
what
from then
name?
on, his name was M.G. Purushothaman Nambiadri.
Seri.
But from that point on, and this is my memory growing up, ended up ended up keeping really bad company, was an alcoholic when in the next 5 years, kind of was downhill for him from then. And kind of a lot of defining experiences in my life was around, the trauma of that, and trying to see how I could not make those same mistakes. So it's kind of how I thought about the world. The flip side was my mom. Again, very strong woman. I mean, she got her PhD after having 8 of us, and then went on to have a really good career in education. Picked my oldest brother and sister were married, but she picked, because of the challenges we were having with my dad, picked up 6 of us kids and moved from Trivandrum to Delhi, and kind of single-handedly raised us. So my sisters all ended up, I have 5 sisters, and all of them ended up, having similar characteristics. So I've been surrounded by very strong women. And the things that I got from my dad, one of it was, he was very easily bored, and I got a lot of that. So, it was very hard for him to stick to one thing for an extended period of my time. So, so part of the challenge that I was also trying to deal with was, how do I overcome that? The flip side was that he was interested in practically everything, and had a really good understanding of a number of areas. And I think I get a lot of that as well. But a significant first chunk of my career in life was around, how do I craft my life differently? So that said, let me move on to kind of give you sort of just wanted you to understand where I came from, move on to how my journey itself was. So I had one of my guys actually put this graphic together. So 87, right after I ended up joining HCL for about 3 months. And I seriously intended to actually continue that. The one thing, and kind of reflective of my background, the one thing that actually was a big challenge for me was that I realized that one of the ways in which you socialize within the company was by going out drinking. And it was just a big challenge for me. So I ended up, when I got admission to CMU for my PhD, I said, here I go. Went there, started my PhD in information systems, found out pretty soon that the research work done in the business school was not very, not highly mathematical, was much more of the fuzzy organizational behavior side, switched to operations, had a phenomenal guide, a gentleman called Tom Morton. Tom was one of the smartest people that I've met. And, ended up wrapping up pretty fast, graduated in 1990, and was the early part of the recession, ended up, was very lucky to get a job at that time. So went to work teaching at Duke. And I spent about 3 years, I wasn't really enjoying the academic career, and I was teaching MBA students wasn't something that really excited me, and I think that kind of reflected in how I did as well. But my publications were actually pretty good. And in 1993, I got a call out of the blue, and this was Santosh, who'd shown up. We started talking, and he said, "What are you doing wasting your time in academia? You ought to come help me build this company that I just started." And so I kind of flew to San Francisco, met the gentleman that Santosh was working with. He was head of a company called Chemoil. His name was Bob Chandran, one of the first really successful Indian entrepreneurs. Chemoil at that time was about 400 or 500 million in revenues. This was in the early 90s. And he kind of made me an offer I couldn't refuse. So I ended up moving to San Francisco, spent a year, and then, as a group, we decided that we wanted to actually scale up CalSoft, moved to India, spent a couple years scaling up the team, and we took the company public in 96 or so. In about between 96 and 97, ended up having some challenges with both, primarily with Santosh, and I decided to move on. And part of our by the time in 1990, I met my beautiful wife, Mona, and we got married in 1992, and it's been phenomenal. I mean, she's kind of given me, she's been the person that's kind of given me the moral compass. She's very outspoken and very, takes care of all our external relations. So she's very outspoken and very, very, very good at organizing. So has been a phenomenally good influence on me. So, but by the time I finished up with CalSoft, I realized that I'd moved Mona 6 times in 5 years, and we had 2 kids by then. And so we decided to move to Atlanta. And that's her parents lived in Charlotte, so close enough to go visit them once in a while, but not necessarily every day. So our 2 boys were born in 95 and 96, and then we had a little one in 2006. She's now 13. So part of when I moved to Atlanta, the whole CalSoft experience for me, I kind of spent the time actually building up the team in Chennai, and was very passionate. Most of the guys were, I personally groomed. So it was a pretty disruptive and something that affected my psyche. So what I decided I really wanted to do was to see, and this was again, my influence from my dad. I really wanted to figure out if I could single-handedly build a company, make it profitable, and run it. And I started a small consulting outfit, which kind of grew by about, so we went through So by the time it got to a reasonable size, it was early 2000, 2001, when the big recession hit, but I navigated through that. And for about 6 years, I ran it with every single quarter being cash flow positive, and every single month except one that I ran it cash flow positive through all of that. So and I completely bootstrapped that. So it kind of built confidence in me. Between 2004 and 2007, I tried to scale it. Had really good ideas, but as usual, I ended up the kind of exec team that I brought on board wasn't very good. But so we eventually ended up exiting the business in 2007. By which time, Mona had been raising kids and wanted to go back to her career. And 2007 to 2010, I kind of took a break. And I also wanted to spend more time with my little one. She just turned 1, and spend time in Atlanta. In 2010, we kind of had 2009, 2010, we kind of had a little bit of a perfect storm. And that was, both my boys had health issues that, really required significant attention from both of us. My little one was 3 at that time, and usual support system was Mona's parents. And her dad, precisely at that time, ended up getting a really severe form of Parkinson's called Parkinson's plus. He, in fact, ended up passing away in 2011. But it was kind of a rough time for us, and I was at a stage where I figured I could be anywhere, and I kind of decided to utilize the one major support system I had, which was my family back in India. So we moved to Bangalore, lock, stock, and barrel. Kept our house in Atlanta, still have it, but Bangalore is where I then built this company, Raise a Think. And again, as I did in the past, I bootstrapped it for the first 4 or 5 years. And then about 2.5 years ago, decided to actually scale it on the product side. We split the company into two. The consulting piece is still functioning independently. Not the product development piece is still functioning independently. This one piece where we're trying to do is build a scalable platform. I'll talk a little bit about it a little later. We moved to, and as part of that, I moved to San Francisco back in 2014. It was the time my boys were starting college. It was also a perfect time for us. Spent the next 3 years there and then moved back to Bangalore. And that's where I am. The intent is that, my sisters are all now in a place called Gurulur, which is kind of like Ooty, but a lot quieter. And we've all kind of bought places which are walking distance from each other, and we're building our retirement home there. So that's kind of my history in a nutshell. But the 2 or 3 things that I learned about myself during that time, one of the things was, that obviously I have my dad's characteristic in the sense that I get bored very, very quickly. But one of the things that I realized was that I could see trends developing way earlier than other people did. The second thing and a lot of times, I saw things come and go, and I wish I'd acted on it earlier. The second thing I realized was that, the way that I looked at problems was very, very different than others. So when I would describe my approach to someone early on in the process, they would look at me and ask, what are you smoking? So, but I also realized through my experience with my first company that, I had the chops to take something which is very abstract or about which I thought very differently and bring it to fruition in a reasonably effective manner. So it's kind of been the theme of what I've been doing since the early part of Bangalore. So what do I do now? So essentially, the way that I looked at, by the way, feel free to interrupt, Shalini, Rajiv. Hi, Ganeshan. So feel free to interrupt.
Sure. Sure.
at any point in time. So see, when there was initial interest about AI, a lot of the emphasis went on, what kind of models do we develop? A lot of emphasis on ML and DL. I thought about it differently. I thought about it in terms of what I call intelligent systems. And a little bit of a different animal if you look at it, because essentially what I think of intelligent systems is a component or components which have the ability to predict things really well. I mean, which most good models have, but has also built-in capability to continuously learn and update itself. And if you see most intelligence systems that have been put in place in organizations, you'll find that the effort involved in building them initially is significantly smaller than the effort involved in keeping them smart over time. The third is for it to be actually able to proactively interact and work with experts. The fourth is its ability to construct by itself a model of the world. So a number of these factors which actually made things, made it smart and sort of, if you look at it, think like a human but at scale. So I kind of started with that premise. And I started with that premise that this is where intelligent systems will evolve to over the next 5 to 10 years. Today, people think in terms of models. They're very, very narrow and siloed thinking. But this is where I think the world is going. And what I wanted to do was build a platform that would enable me to craft these very, very quickly. And so the initial ones we built took us on an average 6 to 9 months, and my effort over time has been trying to compress that down to a month or even shorter. So the first part of it that we built was essentially the crafting of that intelligence, and the one area that I focused in very, very heavily, and I'm happy to go into a lot of detail on it in a separate conversation that would take a lot of time. But the one area that I focused on it, where I believe that the nub of the challenge lies, is in experimentation. Is typically how fast one got something from being relatively okay to really, really smart really depended on the number of options you could experiment with, and it's a craft. And what I was able to do was to scale something from a person within my team running 5 to 6 experiments a day to hundreds of them in a really smart way. And they could apply that, and we've built in the capability to apply that to fairly complex configurations of these systems. So that was the first piece I built, and then we have a few clients who've been kind of working with us on very bespoke, specific problems that we've used the platform to craft and build for them really quickly. There are a couple of organizations that came around and asked us, "Hey, how are you guys doing this so fast?" And actually, one of them is a large bank in India. And then when we explained to them, they said, "Can we license it from you?" And so they've essentially first time licensed our platform and are working with it. But the challenge I ran into with that thought process was that, the problem with scoped intelligence systems is that their effectiveness is usually limited by the human processes that are around it. So my next quest was looking for an area where we could actually disrupt a signal, and that's why you find that a lot of the time intelligence systems are used. They're used essentially by startups in very, very specific situations because they're starting greenfield, and they don't have the legacy of human processes to work with. So my quest was trying to search for specific environments which are greenfield and which require which would really benefit from a dose of being intelligent. So eventually we found a few organizations like that, and the one that the one that I'll kind of talk to you about today is actually a mid-sized but very high quality manufacturing company, and you can see manufacturing and retailing company, and you can see what they do from the from the image. But so their challenge was that their supply chain planning and optimization systems are so specific and so dynamic that they've not been able to actually onboard off-the-shelf supply chain systems, and we were able to go in there and convince them, and we're doing that right now, to build out a really smart, intelligent system which could react almost instantly to changes in the marketplace, which it would learn to identify very, very quickly, and then incorporate human intelligence at the same time. What we're looking at is trying to improve their process efficiency by in the range of 10 to 15%, which is a massive, in terms of bottom line, is a massive number for them. So now I'm in the process of finding specific niches where we can apply this so that we can scale within that. So that's kind of what I'm doing. I expect that this will take me another 2 to 3 years to get to a reasonable shape when it can run, without my help, and so that's kind of what I'm doing now. So which brings me to what of the future, right? I mean, one of the things that I've found is that I usually enjoy working on more than one thing at a time, and we're kind of moving into that phase of life where we're getting older, and I have maybe 20, 25 years of active life, and I want to be in my boots as long as I can. So I kind of think about the follows, right? I mean, I'm constantly thinking about and working with at different stages. So usually think about something, it usually starts out as something that bothers me, and I'm, I can't get it out of my mind. And then, so it goes through a period of fermentation where I'm actively seeking out information about it, reading about it, understanding it. When I go on my walks, that's all that occupies my mind, so it goes through that process. And then at some point in time, I'm able to put structure and say, okay, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. This is kind of how I would define the problem. And then do an early prototype. And this could be something that is, relatively feasible, but in a contained kind of an environment, and then pilot it. Beyond that, I lose interest in it. Someone else's turn to look at. So there are the 3 broad projects that I'm kind of in my spare time working on, which I'll continue. So one of them is what I call living systems, and please don't laugh at me, because usually I get when I describe it to people. All these 3 are kind of very, very different things that I'm working on. So the living systems idea came to me, when I was hanging out with my little one, and the challenge with our house was we were living in Atlanta, and it was a monstrosity. So I could go without seeing my boys for a couple of days at a time. I had my office on the top right corner, and my kids were in the bottom left corner in the basement playing their video games, and we'd go for a long time without seeing each other. And I started thinking about, why are we living like this? What is the if I start deconstructing my life and my day, and what I do on a day-to-day basis, and where I spend my money and what I invest my time in, is it all really helping me? Is it improving my quality of life? Is it worth it? And I found that, you know, we could actually dispense with 95% of the things that we do and not make a dent in the quality of life. The thinking has now evolved in my mind to, thinking about how we live, and start saying that. See, if you look at most ecosystems, and if you look at plants and animals that live in it, they at the end of the day make a positive effect on it. So they don't, we are probably the only ones that actually destroy the environment and destroy the ecosystems around us. So the question is, can we construct a life in a way that that actually continues to be a positive influence? And so I've been looking at talking to a lot of different people, looking at lots of different literature to craft a way in which you can live with massively improved quality of life than what we do now, but live it in a way which is very different. So lots of very non-traditional thinking in there. But at some point over the course of the next 1 or 2 years, I really first want to write about it and formalize my thinking. The next thing I'm working on is, I call it fuzzy symbolism, and it a lot has to do with, and this is mostly in my area in AI. It mostly has to do with, and this is something I started thinking about a couple of years ago. I've made some initial progress. It's about how do you get intelligent systems to reason. So there's some early work going on at Google about things like relational networks, but I think they're all going down the wrong path. And again, I'm not sure how much you guys know about symbolic AI and connectionist AI, which is, neural networks are essentially connectionist. So teaching computers to reason really requires we know that our brain is a connectionist structure. So how do you in the context of that, how do you really build out mechanisms to reason? So I've been working on that, and one new thing that I've been working on, and this this was actually prompted by, my body finally started, I've been in reasonably good shape so far. I go for long walks and eat right and don't drink and smoke and all that. But, in spite of all that, it started finally breaking down a little bit last year. And I'm like, oh, good God. I mean, I need to do something about this. So again, I have, I started looking at things that other people do and wasn't very happy with what I found. So I'm trying to build a framework around that as well. So these are the things that I've been working on. Generally the most important thing is that I wake up in the morning and I have a lot of interesting things to do, and I enjoy what I do, and at the end of the day, I guess that's what matters. So that was it. That was me in a nutshell.
Thank you so much. This is fascinating. I have a million questions, but Rajiv, I know you need to leave, and Sanjeev, welcome. So Rajiv, do you have any questions?
Oh, was it Sanjeev or Ganeshan? Hi, Sanjeev.
Ganeshan came and then he couldn't hear, so he's left. But Sanjeev's also joined us.
Sanjeev's there.
So Rajiv,
Hi, Sanjeev.
trying to ask some questions.
No, I'll do that. Shalini, go ahead. Why don't you begin and then I'll chip in. I too have a lot of questions. Go ahead, Shalini.
I love all the stuff that you're doing. I don't even know where to begin. This hacking old age thing.
Yeah.
Are you thinking of weird things like cryogenics, or you're thinking
No,
of?
no, 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 not at all, not at all, not at
Okay.
all. So I've had a lot of friends who've tried a lot of different things. I mean, there are some folks who've done, so I'll give you a small example. So you're going to put this on YouTube, are you? There are things I should say or I shouldn't say. So so since you are, I'll kind of try and obfuscate it as much as I can. But so I know people who kind of who are doing all the regular kinds of hacking that you find in literature, especially in the Bay Area, right? And I the other day I met this gentleman who he's actually pretty very colorful guy, really well known in the Bay Area. But he is into mind altering drugs, right? So he was telling me about and again, the intent when you say hacking old age, what are you trying to accomplish in the first place? Like his intent is how do I get these these
Micro dosing.
no, microdosing is just for creativity, but how do I get more revealing experiences? How do I and so no, I mean, but though that's not my intent. My intent is much more banal. I know I have, so I'll kind of give you my goal. So there's a gentleman who lives a block away from us in Bangalore. And he's now 82. If you ask me, my role model of aging, that's him. Retired as a civil servant in Delhi, came down to Bangalore. He runs this charity organization, which donates free libraries to small schools in Andhra. So they funded about now 1,500 schools, full of life, always, every time I run into him, we have long conversations. But, you look at him and look at his level of energy and, the thin, sprightly man, look at his level of energy, and it's way more than what I find in some of my 30-year-old and 40-year-old friends. So, the fact that he's able to get up in the morning, and keep his energy levels so high and be passionate about what he's continuing to do and keep his body in reasonable enough shape that, he doesn't have things that hold him back and stop his enjoyment. So the question is, so that's kind of what I'm trying to accomplish, but then look at it in a way, most I don't want to do it in a way that, what's the word for it? And I'm trying to again formalize this, right? In the sense that whenever I've tried to do stuff like this in my life, it's always been an aberration in the sense that, you go spend an hour in the gym or whatever, it just doesn't come naturally. It isn't something I want to do. It's something, it doesn't, so there are things that I've managed to incorporate in my life that, that, like, for example, if I need, I when I was in the US, I'd go for a 4-mile walk with my dog every day. And that was easy, because I enjoyed it. I truly. But how do you craft these things into your life? How do you morph yourself and morph your life around that? So that's kind of what I'm thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, so let me jump in now. So I put two queries, one on the professional and one on the personal. So
yep.
The priorities. So on the professional side, the company that you're running now in AI, you didn't go. Which domains do you see that being applied in, and some more thing on the specific applications, and if at all in healthcare, if you can share.
Yeah. So we've most of our clientele so far have primarily been in the financial services, because they're the ones who had the money, to be honest. But initially we spent a chunk of time in India. Now, as we are moving into the US, we're finding these new niches to go into. So, for example, this particular one that I mentioned to you is in retail. And the reason we got to it, the way we think about domains in the first place is, we want to craft these intelligent systems to customers in a way that there's not, there are multiple organizations with the same problem. So in this particular niche within retail, where you have this kind of a structure where you cannot do the traditional kind of supply chain planning, is actually, it's a fairly vast. So we did a fair amount of research upfront about it. There's about 30, 40 organizations which have this particular issue. The second is the ability to find a really good design partner. So so we kind of go through that this thing. So retail is one area we've been in. Financial services, I said. So healthcare, I've not aggressively pursued. The last company that I did, we actually had a significant presence in pharma. So we did a significant amount of work both on so that we were actually building a product, and we built it on optimizing clinical trials, as well as we had a product which again, I don't know how well you know about the pricing and contracting structures for pharma in the US. It's very complex. So we had a product which enabled large pharma to be able to optimize their contracting strategies. That's what we sold. So I'm familiar with that. I'm also helping my brother as well. So they, again, I'm not allowed, I don't know how much I'm allowed to say about that, but he has a biomarker company in lupus where they're looking at, so lupus, and now he's also got the technology for multiple sclerosis.
So he's got a biomarker. He's developing a new biomarker for lupus.
No. So he licensed, he licensed a biomarker.
Okay.
But then they're going ahead and using. So lupus and MS are very
one is autoimmune and neurodegenerative.
Rare diseases, right? So in both those cases, I can put you in touch with him. Actually, you guys would have a lot in common. But essentially, the way they're approaching the problem is, so they license. So he's more of a commercial pricing, contracting kind of, So we actually worked together on my last thing, but. That's been his domain. He has a PhD from Hopkins. Talk about it in my family. People keep switching. He actually spent, I think, 10 or 12 years in the IAS. And then he decided to show up. Then he came to the US to do a PhD. So, but yeah, I mean, so what he's doing is he's actually. So they've taken the original IP and then they've kind of done additional work on it to make it to streamline the to streamline the process of actually conducting those tests.
Okay.
And then they're combining it with historical data from the patients, which they've collected over time, as well as device data, and then using that to predict the likelihood of the occurrence of a flare.
Okay.
So as well as effectiveness of certain medications and being able to control those flares. So those are two really important, because any acute incidence of lupus it's pretty painful and ends up costing the healthcare system a chunk.
Yeah, it affects the kidneys as well. We have very good treatments for lupus, incidentally, but from a
I'm
kidney. Yeah. So just going to the other part, when you looked at, you talked about living systems, you talked about, age hacking, etc.
Yeah.
And it's what has been pretty fascinating is that throughout your last so many decades,
Yeah.
you also talked about how you're quickly getting bored and flitting from one interest to another interest. Although it's not too many, but you can
Yeah.
make out that you've been actively engaged intellectually. So what I wanted to know is, how has it been over the last 30 years in terms of the journey inwards? And what do you see in the next 20, 25, 30 years if taking apart, because you're filling up your time with ideas, right? So you've got so many things there.
Yeah.
It looks like virtually all your years, all your seconds, everything's being filled up with things to do. So just about that inward journey. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I don't talk about it much. And again, part of the reason, Rajiv, is, is that I think, I feel a little apprehensive about saying it in this forum, but let me give it a shot.
Sure.
See, one of the realizations I've come to over my last 30 years is that is that I've grown very suspicious of and again it's my own thoughts, right? I've grown very suspicious of the lack of rigor in assumptions. So it's we tend to create these axioms in our mind and then kind of build on top of that, and pretty soon we don't know which end is which, right? So it's something that I have to keep watching in myself, because it's even your I'm sorry, maybe we should kind of
okay,
we should kind of do this offline, because
offline, I understand.
No, definitely.
because I can it's I mean it's to kind of go through.
Yeah, Nandu, I look forward to that. I really look forward that when you're in Bangalore that we meet and have a chat over that.
Absolutely.
And I know, Rajiv, you have to leave.
No. So just one more question. So apart from work and this thing, what else do you do with your time apart from family? Any other hobbies you picked up? Any music? Any other? What are your other ways to spend time?
So music, unfortunately, not. I sing a lot, but it's usually my sisters tell me that when they have that's when they invite me to sing. But no, unfortunately, that's one area where I've not been blessed with great talent. So so to be honest, about other than work, like every bit of my time goes with my kids. So but even there, I've realized that there are some things that I've enjoyed doing. So for example, one of the things that I would do when I took my little daughter to school was that she would make me tell stories, so entertained. So usually the way we did it is she would tell me 2 words, and then I had to kind of make up the story. And we actually came up with some really, really good stories.
I can imagine.
So it's one of the things I'm hoping to write at some point in time. I mean, she's a really good artist, so hopefully she can do the illustration and we can write something.
Wonderful.
So that's apart from that, stuff like this kind of occupies all my time. So sorry, nothing earth-shaking there.
Okay,
Thanks,
and and sometime look forward to the Gudalur place.
You
I
should
think
come, man.
what you're
You
doing
should
there
come.
is so fascinating. So
Yeah.
Shalini and Sanjeev, just for you to know what his family has done in Gudalur is really path-breaking over the last so many decades. They've set up a hospital for the tribals, Adivasis, and they're doing some path-breaking work there, completely under the radar. It's very fascinating. So I leave now. Nandu, pleasure hearing you, and look forward
Thanks,
to
Rajiv.
reconnecting here. Okay?
Absolutely.
And Shalini, Sanjeev, take care. Bye.
Thanks. And in fact, talking about healthcare, I have 2 students right now working on AI in healthcare, replacing a doctor. So one of
I'm
them
sorry.
is
Replacing? I'm sorry.
replacing the doctor or enhancing a doctor.
Yeah.
So one of them is a CEO of a rural health clinic in Florida, and she's been trying to work, to create AI systems which are pretty robust.
Yeah, it is a phenomenally fruitful area. So
Yes.
when I was in Atlanta, my last stint, which was 2007 to 10, I ran into this phenomenally smart doctor. I mean, he was a cardiologist, ran 3 or 4 clinics. The one thing I really liked about him was, he would spend his time seeing patients through the day, and then between 4 and 7 every day, he would sit down and make detailed notes about each patient that he met, so that the next time they came, he would remember, and he would then think about it. So one of the challenges, I mean, we worked on it for almost 6 months, and then decided that the regulatory realm at that time was going to be hard. But his question was, he said, Nandu, at the end of the day, 90% of what I do is repetitive.
Right.
And you find a way by which, we can build a system where I just give it a couple of hints, and unless I know that it's a real outlier, it will pick up all the information and create the diagnosis and create the, and to me at that time, it seemed like a very, very fruitful idea. And back in the day, what was that? This has been something that people have been working on since the 80s, right? I mean, they had that. So I think, I think definitely challenging, but very fruitful.
I have a couple more questions, but Sanjeev, do you have any questions? Sanjeev? Okay, I guess he can't, doesn't seem to have a microphone.
I think his mic is short.
Okay. So in fuzzy symbolism, this is following John Hagelin's work, or you're doing something very different?
So here's the challenge, right? I mean, again, you're familiar with AI, right?
Yes.
So I the way I kind of thought about, are you familiar with some of the work done in language, like word2vec and so on? I mean, this is pretty old.
Yes, I teach that.
Oh, okay, you teach that. So you kind of understand that, right?
Yes.
So the challenge has always been, how do you really represent your symbolic AI or symbolic world in kind of a connectionist setting. So if you kind of look at the symbols in our mind, the question that you have to ask yourself is, I think we went back in the day, we always thought of those as having clear structures. Right. And so here representationally, you have to see, are these very specific, well-defined structures, or are they fuzzy? Are they represented in a way? And if so, what is the magic behind composing them? So, for example, when I'm uttering this particular sentence that I utter, there's a lot going on. There is putting together of the symbols to form a coherent thought. There is then using that coherent thought to create language, and it's not really clear which comes before what. Is it the language creating the thought, or vice versa?
Right.
So there's a representational issue. There's an issue of how do you put these things together to form a coherent thought? So that in my mind is kind of teaching somebody how to put a jigsaw puzzle together. So what I've done is I've broken it down into very specific chunks at this point.
Okay.
And I'm trying to kind of say, okay, if I were to do something, what capabilities should each of these pieces have?
Got it.
And then think about, again, I mean, I don't get much time to work on this, but then if I do that, then if I put these things together, what is the smallest version of it that I can do?
Got it.
That even if I don't do a full blown job on one of the pieces, I can still close it so that the whole thing works together.
Got it.
And then I can. So that's kind of the direction I'm going.
Right. Okay.
But so sorry.
No, that's fine. That's good. Go ahead. Interesting. Yeah, because obviously that huge amount of work needs to be done in that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating.
Oh yes, it is.
I mean, so.
I teach regular machine learning, and I teach text analytics, and it's like very, very different and very, very.
Yeah.
I mean, they're interlinked, but yes. Okay, living systems. Do you think it's a problem of the West of excesses, or do you think it's worldwide?
So I think it has again to do with the if I kind of think about myself and say what are you passionate about, other than all the stuff that it's actually about building systems, right?
Right.
So then you say, okay, why do we so one of the challenges that I have with my head is that I'm always asking questions. So right from when I was a kid, what used to irritate me was that months would have different number of days. I'm like, okay, I can believe that. Okay, a year has to be 165 or 66 days. Okay, I got it. But why can't the first 11 months be 30 days and the last one be just So those kinds of things really bothered me. So in this, what bothers me is, for example, as I'm driving through Bangalore and people say, man, it's a crowded city. But I look at the space around me and it's occupied less than 5% of the time. Right. By occupied, I mean that, if you look at my house, the actual amount of space I occupy within the houses, or between the three of us we occupy within the house, is way less than 5%. We're not there most of the time.
Sure.
And when we're there, a big chunk of the time we're sleeping.
Correct.
So then the question becomes, why are we going ahead and building all this stuff? Is there a way to craft differently? The same thing that I asked about, so the question you asked about, is it the West or is it the East? It's a question of the underlying axioms that define a system, and in the West, those things are things like a unit family. I mean, does that really make sense? The concept that you need a house, does it make sense? Why do you need cars? I mean, cars are great. I mean, but the reason it's kind of a circular argument, right? You build roads because you need to move your cars around it. It takes up space, and therefore you build your structures far apart. So so I started thinking about that, and then I said maybe I should approach the other way, and I should say, okay, what is it that I really need? I mean, what defines my quality of life?
Right.
And let's start with the simplest piece. Let's talk about how I sleep. I mean, which happens to be a big thing for me these days, because as you grow older, your sleep starts getting worse.
Right.
So what do I really need? I mean, can I actually? So one of my efforts has been to try and think about a sleeping chamber that I can build, which significantly enhances my quality of sleep. Right now, can I do that with a very low energy footprint? So you start asking, when you start thinking about it that way, you start asking different questions. So I think the first thing is, what are you trying to shoot for? What are the individual markers of quality of life? What what does it mean to live in a community? Why do you? Because when I ask people questions like this, I get these standard responses. But you need your privacy. You need your like, what does that mean?
Right.
So trying to distill that and get down to the basics, and then build up from there. That's kind of what I'm. Sorry again.
No.
I hope I didn't bore you.
Not at all. No, I mean, I'm thinking of the Japanese.
Yeah, but
whatever, the drawers to sleep over.
Oh yeah, no, not. See, the intent is always to say you need to enable a vastly superior standard of living. So I mean, it wouldn't be a success if I designed something like this and you actually had to sacrifice. So if I could prove that, hey, if I constructed something like this, and some people would kill to move from a big house in the Bay Area to that, and for that, and that would be a significant increase in quality of life, both in terms of how you live, your food, your how you get to enjoy nature, your kids' education, your health. If I can design a system that does that, I mean, that would be. And by I don't mean me particularly.
Of course.
I want to set the framework for that, so that
got it. No. I mean, I'm thinking. I've lived in Atlanta too, and Atlanta is just a similar thing. Live bigger houses, the better. Like Druid Hills and all those places. And just for the sake of it, like you said, you were talking about you couldn't see your kids for days on end because it's whereas in the Bay Area, we're talking about, tiny houses and bohemian living and community living and all kind of thing. But are these all solutions to whatever issues we're facing now? Or like you're saying, how do we ground up think of what we live for? Why do we live in, great systems around it? So there are two different ways to approach it, right? One is to solve today's problems versus.
See, again, I mean, it's an issue of motivation, right? For me, it's an intellectual challenge. Right. The moment you start thinking about, moment your passion is in helping other people, I'm helping people for me is a byproduct. It's not, to be honest, something that I,
got it.
that I worry about every day. But it's an intellectual challenge.
That's cool. Sanjeev, do you want to have any questions? Okay. I think we could.
Thanks, Shalini.
Months and months. But thank you so much. This is fascinating, and I'm sure you'll get millions of people reaching out to you after this. So thank you.
Thanks, Shan. Bye.
Bye. Take care. Good.